All right, thanks for tuning in today. Today we're going to have the Trail of Tears. This is not a great time in American history, a pretty dark spot. Not just because we pushed around the Indians, but the way that we did it this time. I mean, before other tribes would attack Americans would attack them back. Who knows, where these things get started. Sometimes it's the Americans' fault, and even sometimes it's the Indians' fault. But here, this was clearly America was in the wrong in this particular instance here with the Trail of Tears. Um, and just to take you through it and to explain exactly what happened here, this was not something that America was universally for. If we take a look at some of the votes here that we're going to be talking about when it comes to the treaties and the votes, they were very, very close. And I don't have the other one here for you, but these votes were not universal. There was quite a bit of opposition, and in fact, on one of the treaties, the it was only passed by one vote. So this was a very divided time. Um, People were voting for their self-interest, and the reason why is because Andrew Jackson came in as a very popular president because he believed that the regular man should have a voice in the government. Up until now is really the social elite, the educated, the rich that had votes. Not everybody had votes. Yes, they had to be white and male, but that didn't mean all whites and males. In fact, very few white males had the opportunity to vote because the restrictions on whether you own property or pay taxes um, meant that you got to vote. Andrew Jackson came in and said, it doesn't matter if you own property, if you don't pay taxes, if you're an American male, a white male, then you should have a right to vote. And so a lot of people got the right to vote around this time, and they're going to vote for their interests. They're going to vote for what they want. And what they wanted was the gold on Cherokee land. Gold was discovered on Cherokee land, and everybody wanted to get to it. So they voted their ability to go in and take that land from the Indians. And they said that the Indians had no standing in the courts. They were not an American citizen. They were not white. They were not, or they had to be a white male. And so they said you can't bring any action against us. You have no standing in the courts. So they decided to have the Indian Removal Act, which authorized the federal government to negotiate treaties with the eastern tribes, exchanging their lands for lands in the West. So basically, they were saying, okay, you got to give up this land, and we're going to give you this land over here in Oklahoma, which is not nearly as good as the land that was over here, especially since there's gold in these hills over here. So they wanted to move all these tribes, and Cherokee were the ones that we talk about the most, and move them to Oklahoma. So again, that was passed in a very tight vote. That was not something that America was universally behind. Just the Jackson Democrats were the ones that were really for this. They were mostly in the South, and they wanted this land here, and so they voted themselves the right to take that land from the Indians. Um, so yeah, it's the gold that really sparks this. Otherwise, they were going to leave them alone, and so they started trying to take their land. And so the Cherokee decided to fight back, but not through force of arms, not through actual beating each other up. They took them to court, which is the right way to do it. Cherokee Nation did it the right way, but the Supreme Court said, we're not going to make a ruling because you're not a citizen. You're not um, white male or anything like that. So, yeah, you got a point here, but we're not going to do anything about it. Well, a missionary, Samuel Worcester, decided to take up the case for them. And since he was white, male, American citizen, he did have standing in the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court said, okay, you win. You get to keep your land. But Georgia and Andrew Jackson decided to ignore the ruling. In fact, Jackson was famous for saying, the court has made its ruling, now it can enforce it. Which brings us back to chapter 6, where we talked about the executive enforces the laws. Well, what happens when the executive doesn't enforce the law? The court made a ruling, and now the executive says, I'm not going to enforce it. Well, it's up to the legislature to do anything. And Jackson had plenty of power, plenty of friends in Congress that wouldn't impeach him, so he got to stay in power. And the Trail of Tears is what would take place. So the Trail of Tears is basically the rest of the Indian. A lot of the Indians have already left and taken up these lands over here out west in Texas and Oklahoma, but there were still quite a few left behind that wanted to continue fighting in the courts and so forth. And so the government sent in soldiers and forced them to march, sometimes through blizzards, through droughts. There are reports of the commanding general telling them, okay, stop the march, let them rest, don't go through the drought, they're just going to get hurt or die. And some of these commanders ignored them and continued pushing the Indians through. That's where a lot of Indians died, is when these lower captains decided to just push them. Again, to also explain Andrew Jackson's motives, if you look at his history, he does not have a very good relationship with American Indians. And unfortunately, people attribute what one tribe did to them to all the tribes. They treated the Indians as too many times they treated them like they were just one people when they were not. One tribe had nothing to do with the other, but yet people like Andrew Jackson universally just did not like the American Indians and treated them horribly. So this was not a great time in American history, but what we do want to remember, from this time, is that gold started it. That's when they found gold on Cherokee land, the Indians' land. They voted themselves the right. The Indian Removal Act allowed the U.S. the federal government to negotiate treaties with the eastern tribes, exchanging land. Which sounds okay, but again, that was a close vote, and the Indians decided to fight in Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. They were right, but the court refused to make a ruling. And then in Worcester versus Georgia, they actually win, but Georgia and the U.S. government ignore this, and they send them on the Trail of Tears, which is what it'll be known as, where the American Indians are sent on this journey, and many of them died. All right, I'm sorry to leave you on such a bad note, but next one will be next lesson is going to be a lot nicer. But we do have to remember our history, good, bad, warts and all. History is about learning from mistakes in our past and trying to do things better. And this is a perfect example of that instance. All right, so I'll see you next time, and thanks for tuning in.